Alright, have you ever wondered by yourself, what can I do to dress those in need? Well, today is the day for Dev Diary 79. We're going to be talking about dressing up those naked Corvettes. Naked Corvettes, for who of you who have completely forgotten what they are, and how could you, really, after that video that got over 100,000 views. It is a Corvette that is the cheapest possible version of the ship that you can build en masse by the hundreds and then throw them at the enemy because it's the most cost-effective way of doing things, funnily enough. However, it looks like that in 1.8 we're going to be seeing some significant changes to ship components as well as balance changes specifically for the Corvettes in question. So, basically what we've got here, the problem has been identified, and apparently it was the best technologies are basically too expensive. In order to change this, the team is going to do the following. A Corvette hull is now going to cost 100 minerals instead of 60. So the increase of a single hull at the start of the game is already going to be increased by 40, which is quite significant. Obviously, there is that 40% modifier there in terms of minerals. So that's, at the start of the game, is quite a few months of resources that you need to focus on something. And this is problematic for me. Because, well, this may cause some problems with the way the pirate event at the start of the game is actually handled. However, apparently Wiz is changing some of the systems in place, and according to him and I'm quickly gonna double check here on what he actually said, apparently the base mineral income is being increased in order to counter it ever so slightly. So, what else has changed here as in addition to increasing the hull cost? Well, it looks like instead of having the Tier 1 weapons and Tier 2 weapons having 100% difference between them, it's going to be 16% instead. So, for instance, the example that is being given here is the red lasers, which normally cost 3 minerals. The second tier of it, instead of costing 6, will go up to 3.5 minerals. So, the actual jump is significantly less there. And apparently similar changes are being done to utility and required components. So a lot of components are having their base costs majorly slashed. Whether or not this is the case for the larger hull types is not really expanded upon if it's only for Corvettes or also destroyers, which in all honesty, if it does not work for destroyers, it just moves the problems to that type of ship in my humblest opinion. Of course, my opinion is humble as always. Regardless, this does mean that it becomes more cost-effective to run more high-end ships when it comes to Corvettes. So when you have those technologies and you finally get them, you can actually use them. And the example they're giving here is a maxed-out little Corvette that still costs 259 minerals per pop, which is still pretty expensive in my opinion, because normally they cost, in the base game in 1.7 right now, they cost, I think, like 63, 64, and it lowers even more once you get the Corvette yards on your space station. So yeah, Corvettes are being addressed, or are they being dressed? Pun aside. So we got some other changes as well. Flak is being moved to point defense. It originally was a medium slot weapon, and is going to get a faster firing rate and better tracking than normal point defense, which makes it very useful against missiles and strike craft. Speaking of which, strike craft will have their evasion buffed, making them harder to bring down quickly without mass point defense. This is potentially a problem when fighting fallen empires and the scourge, as they do use a fairly large amount of the strike craft, especially versus Awakened Empires. This is going to be a serious problem, as Awakened Empire's fleet power is already ridiculously high to begin with. Missiles and strike craft will have their speed majorly increased, so they will no longer take as long to reach the enemy once the fireworks start, and Tier 1 weapons are being balanced to make mass drivers no longer the best choice in almost every single situation in the game. Apparently, there's also some changes to the targeting algorithm. I actually was not aware that this was a thing. So apparently, ships originally, if they would have, for instance, weapons that were highly useful against shields, would just rotate between targets that had all their shields up, or in case of hull, etc. However, now the ship will actually continuously shoot a target until they're dead, or at least there is a higher chance that they will keep on shooting a target until they are dead. I was not aware that this was a thing. And that's actually quite interesting that that is the case. So no longer will the quote-unquote hyper-efficient targeting be there, which means that specialized weapons are a lot better in combat than their stats would indicate. So apparently we're going to see more stat-relevant weapons rather than weapons that are a lot stronger than what you'd expect, which in this case makes the plasma rather interesting, considering they are slow and they're useful against armor, which means they will always chew into shields regardless. I'm going to need to give it a little bit of a think to see how that actually applies. Here's a big one: missile retargeting. Now, right now, there is the issue of quote-unquote overkill, where the missile ships in your ship will shoot their wad, or as TV tropes usually refer to it, the Macross Missile Massacre, to a single target, and then as soon as it dies, all the other missiles just self-destruct, which is obviously not a very good way of using your firepower. There is now a chance, or at least there will be a chance in 1.8, where a missile will retarget to a new objective. This will happen at a minimum once, but there's also a chance of it retargeting multiple times. Yeah, that's actually really good. It's something that people have been wanting for the longest time, and missiles will be a lot more useful. The thing with this is, however, and of course I'm going to throw the curveball here. This means that missiles will most likely be more powerful than any of the other starting weapons, especially until destroyers get into the game. Now, obviously, this was already a problem before, where missiles were objectively quite good until point defense came in. But yeah, I am under the impression that we finally will see the age of the missile, which is kind of cool. They will also have a retargeting range, which is a minimum amount of distance, or at least the maximum amount of distance they need to retarget towards a new target. It's kind of cool. Then there is the final change, which is the change to destroyer combat. So in the behavior of a ship, when you put in your precognitive interface or anything like that, there is always the behavior modifier. And destroyers in the past have been basically holding back quite a lot, and especially considering destroyers are apparently supposed to be used as picket ships, which are ships that are patrolling the front and shooting down craft, etc. Having them in the middle of the lines is obviously not that effective. So apparently the changes are going to come in where destroyers will be dedicated to deflecting small craft and missiles, as well as attack craft, and being ahead of the cruisers in order to slap all that stuff out of the sky so the cruisers and battleships can do their work. Corvettes will obviously be charging ahead, so we'll see whether or not we're going to see any changes there. But yeah, the destroyer will actually be a little bit more effective, and especially considering the flak is moving towards a point defense slot, it also means that the destroyer will be the de facto point defense ship, as I do believe that the destroyer and maybe some of the cruiser designs have the best layouts when it comes to point defense, but I'll need to double check that myself. Yeah, so we may actually be upon an age where we will see the destroyer missile meta becoming a thing. Obviously, this is all paper crafting, so who knows if that is going to be a thing or not. However, the naked Corvettes, they're being dressed. We're going to see massive changes in some of the modules. We're going to be seeing retargeting, and destroyer combat behavior is going to change. Exciting times. 1.8 is looking better and better as we go along. Apparently, this is all for today, and next week, apparently, we don't know what's going to be next week. Apparently, it's going to be the biggest one for 1.8. Either it's the announcement of the new pack, which I highly doubt, because I still believe, firmly believe, this is either going to be for Gamescom or something else. We'll see. But apparently something big is coming next week, and I'm really curious about what it's going to be. But in the meantime, if you thought this was useful, feel free to give it a like and or subscribe. Of course, if you didn't like it, the dislike button is there as well. Until next time, take good care of yourselves and, of course, each other.